The sun had barely crested the horizon when the first shift began at Lone Star Logistics, a massive freight yard sprawling across 40 acres of industrial landscape in Laredo, Texas, just 8 miles from the Mexican border. The facility hummed with the constant activity of America's cross-border commerce. 18-wheelers arriving from Mexico loaded with goods destined for supermarkets and distribution centers across the United States, while outbound trucks carried American products south toward factories and consumers throughout Latin America. Among the dozens of workers moving through their morning routines was Miguel Santos, a 41-year-old semi-truck loader whose job was as ordinary as it was essential to the operation. Every day, Miguel arrived at 6 a.m. sharp, clocked in at the main office, and spent the next 10 hours loading and securing cargo in refrigerated trailers that would carry temperature-sensitive goods across thousands of miles of American highways. It was honest work that paid $19 per hour, enough to support his modest lifestyle and send occasional money to his elderly mother in Guadalajara. But on the morning of September 23, 2023, Miguel's workstation stood empty. His supervisor waited 20 minutes past his usual arrival time before calling Miguel's cell phone, which went straight to voicemail. By noon, when Miguel had missed half his shift without explanation, security personnel were dispatched to his apartment complex. They found his unit locked and apparently abandoned, with no signs of struggle or hasty departure. 3 days later, federal agents would uncover something that transformed Miguel's mysterious disappearance from a simple case of employee abandonment into one of the largest money laundering investigations in recent FBI history. Hidden within the refrigerated trailers that Miguel had been loading were carefully concealed compartments containing $12.3 million in cartel cash, drug proceeds from operations across the southwestern United States that had been systematically funneled through America's legitimate transportation infrastructure. Now, nearly 8 months after Miguel vanished without a trace, the FBI continues one of its most intensive manhunts, pursuing a man who transformed from an ordinary warehouse worker into one of America's most wanted fugitives. The missing money represents just a fraction of the billions of dollars that criminal organizations move through legitimate businesses every year. But Miguel's theft exposed vulnerabilities in America's transportation systems that have triggered comprehensive security reviews and enhanced law enforcement cooperation across multiple agencies. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story of deception, betrayal, and one man's audacious gamble with the world's most dangerous criminal organizations, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our true crime deep dives. We break down the secret smuggling routes, cartel operations, and FBI investigations that reveal the hidden criminal networks operating within America's legitimate business infrastructure. Hit that subscribe button now. The stories we uncover could change how you see the everyday commerce happening all around us. Miguel Santos embodied the invisible workforce that keeps America's economy moving, reliable, hardworking people whose names never appear in corporate reports, but whose labor makes possible the seamless flow of goods that consumers take for granted. Born in Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, Miguel had immigrated to Texas 15 years earlier through legal channels, obtaining permanent resident status through family connections and building a life characterized by steady employment, modest aspirations, and the quiet dignity of honest work. His daily routine at Lone Star Logistics had remained virtually unchanged for the 7 years he had worked there. Miguel arrived at the freight yard before dawn, parked his aging Ford pickup in the employee lot, and walked through the security checkpoint where guards who knew him by name would wave him through with casual greetings in Spanish and English. The familiarity of the routine, the predictability of the work, and the steady paycheck had provided Miguel with the stability he had sought when leaving the economic uncertainty of life in Mexico. The freight yard itself was a testament to the scale of modern logistics operations, covering an area larger than some small towns and handling cargo volumes that represented billions of dollars in annual commerce. Refrigerated trailers lined up in precise rows awaiting loads of fresh produce from Mexican farms, frozen foods from American processing plants, and temperature-controlled pharmaceuticals that required careful handling throughout their journey from manufacturer to consumer. Miguel's specialization was refrigerated cargo, fruits and vegetables that had to maintain precise temperatures during transport, dairy products that could spoil if temperature controls failed, and frozen goods that represented millions of dollars in inventory moving through the supply chain every day. His job required not just physical strength, but technical knowledge about refrigeration systems, cargo distribution, and weight calculations that ensured safe transport of valuable and perishable goods. The work was physically demanding, requiring Miguel to lift and position packages weighing up to 70 pounds while working in sub-freezing temperatures inside refrigerated trailers. During summer months, the contrast between 100-degree Texas heat and below freezing trailer interiors created additional physical stress that contributed to high turnover rates among less experienced workers. But Miguel had adapted to these conditions over years of employment, developing the stamina and techniques necessary to maintain productivity while protecting his health. His reputation among supervisors and co-workers was exemplary. Never late, never absent without notification, never involved in workplace conflicts or disciplinary issues. Miguel's performance evaluations consistently rated him as exceeding expectations for reliability, productivity, and cooperation with management directives. His fluency in both Spanish and English made him valuable for coordinating with drivers and customers from both sides of the border, and his mechanical aptitude with refrigeration equipment had earned him unofficial recognition as someone who could troubleshoot problems that might otherwise delay shipments. Miguel lived alone in a two-bedroom apartment in a working-class neighborhood of Laredo, maintaining a lifestyle that reflected both his modest income and his practical approach to financial management. His furniture was simple but well-maintained, his clothes were clean and serviceable rather than fashionable, and his entertainment consisted mainly of Spanish-language television, occasional dinners at local restaurants, and weekend phone calls with family members in Mexico. The apartment's most notable features were its extreme cleanliness and organization. Everything had its place, bills were paid promptly, and household supplies were restocked before running out. Miguel approached personal finances with the same methodical attention he brought to his work, maintaining detailed records of income and expenses while building modest savings that provided security against unexpected emergencies or opportunities for advancement. But beneath the surface of this orderly life, Miguel had been struggling with financial pressures that had been building for over 2 years. His mother's deteriorating health required medications and medical care that weren't available through Mexico's public health system, creating ongoing expenses that consumed nearly half of Miguel's after-tax income. His younger sister had lost her job during economic disruptions caused by the pandemic, making her financially dependent on Miguel's support for basic living expenses. Additionally, Miguel had been sending money to help his nephew attend technical school in Guadalajara, an investment in the young man's future that Miguel viewed as essential for breaking the cycle of poverty that had limited opportunities for previous generations of his family. The combined financial obligations were manageable during good months when Miguel could work overtime shifts, but they left no margin for error when unexpected expenses arose or when reduced shipping volumes led to shortened work weeks. The financial pressure intensified dramatically when Miguel's landlord announced a 30% rent increase that would take effect at the end of his current lease. The increase reflected rising property values in Laredo as the city's economic growth attracted new residents and businesses, but it represented an additional monthly expense that Miguel's current income couldn't accommodate without severe cuts to the money he was sending to family members who depended on his support for survival. It was during this period of financial stress that Miguel first encountered the criminal operation that would ultimately transform him from a law-abiding worker into a federal fugitive. The initial contact came through seemingly casual conversation with a coworker who had noticed Miguel's obvious concern about money and who presented himself as someone who might have solutions for workers facing financial difficulties. Roberto Mendez worked as a shipping coordinator at Lone Star Logistics, handling documentation and scheduling for outbound cargo while maintaining relationships with drivers, customers, and regulatory officials who ensured smooth operation of cross-border transportation. Roberto had been employed at the facility for 12 years, building a reputation for competence and reliability that gave him access to sensitive information about shipping schedules, cargo manifests, and security procedures. But federal investigators would later discover that Roberto had been systematically recruited by cartel operatives who had identified Lone Star Logistics as a valuable transportation asset for moving money and drugs through legitimate commercial channels. Roberto's position gave him detailed knowledge about which trailers would be subject to inspection, which routes avoided enhanced security scrutiny, and which documentation could be modified without attracting attention from customs officials or law enforcement agencies. Roberto's approach to Miguel was carefully planned and professionally executed, demonstrating the sophisticated recruitment methods that criminal organizations use to identify and corrupt employees with access to valuable transportation resources. The conversation began with expressions of sympathy for Miguel's financial situation and gradually evolved into suggestions about opportunities for additional income through work that Roberto described as completely legitimate but requiring discretion about business activities that competitive companies preferred to keep confidential. The initial proposition was modest and seemingly reasonable. Roberto explained that certain customers were willing to pay premium rates for guaranteed secure handling of high-value cargo that required special attention during loading and transport. The work would involve ensuring that specific trailers received careful loading, proper temperature control, and priority processing that would minimize delays during transport to time-sensitive destinations. Roberto emphasized that the additional work would be performed during Miguel's regular shifts without affecting his normal responsibilities or creating conflicts with company policies. The extra income would be paid in cash immediately after successful completion of assignments, avoiding the taxes and paperwork associated with official overtime compensation while providing discretionary income that Miguel could use for family support or personal expenses. The payments Roberto offered were substantial enough to solve Miguel's immediate financial problems. An additional $1,000 per week for ensuring that designated trailers receive special attention during loading and transport. For someone earning less than $800 weekly through legitimate employment, the additional income represented a transformative opportunity to address his family's medical expenses, education costs, and housing challenges while building savings for future security. Miguel understood that the offer was unusual and potentially problematic, but Roberto's presentation emphasized the legitimate nature of the work while providing plausible explanations for why certain customers might be willing to pay premium rates for enhanced service. Roberto explained that some pharmaceutical companies and food processors had urgent delivery requirements that justified higher transportation costs, and that Lone Star Logistics was positioned to capture this premium business through employees who could provide the specialized attention these customers demanded. The decision to accept Roberto's offer represented a turning point in Miguel's life. Though he didn't recognize the significance at the time, his acceptance was motivated primarily by financial necessity and Roberto's assurances about the legitimate nature of the work, combined with his trust in a co-worker who had demonstrated competence and reliability over years of professional interaction. Miguel's first special assignment involved loading a refrigerated trailer bound for Phoenix with what Roberto described as temperature-sensitive pharmaceutical supplies requiring careful handling and precise temperature control throughout transport. The trailer appeared normal in every respect, and the loading process followed standard procedures except for Roberto's instructions to ensure that certain packages were positioned in specific locations within the trailer's cargo area. The packages themselves seemed routine, properly labeled boxes that matched the shipping manifest and appeared to contain the pharmaceutical supplies described in the documentation. Miguel's job was simply to load them according to Roberto's specifications while maintaining the same professional standards he applied to all cargo handling responsibilities. But what Miguel didn't understand was that he had just loaded his first shipment of drug money, millions of dollars in cash proceeds from narcotic sales that had been packaged to resemble legitimate pharmaceutical cargo while being transported through America's interstate commerce system for laundering through criminal networks operating in Arizona and California. The $1,000 payment was made immediately in cash as promised, representing more money than Miguel typically earned in a week of regular employment. The transaction was smooth and professional, reinforcing Roberto's assurances about the legitimate nature of the work while providing Miguel with financial resources that immediately began addressing his family's medical expenses and housing challenges. Over the following months, Miguel's special assignments became regular weekly occurrences, with Roberto providing detailed instructions about specific trailers, cargo positioning, and handling procedures that ensured proper transport of what he continued to describe as high-value legitimate merchandise. The additional income transformed Miguel's financial situation, allowing him to support his family's needs while building modest savings that provided security he had never experienced during his years in the United States. The assignments gradually became more complex, requiring Miguel to learn specialized techniques for accessing hidden compartments within refrigerated trailers that had been modified by criminal organizations to conceal cash and drugs during transport. Roberto provided training in these techniques under the guise of advanced cargo handling procedures, explaining that certain high-value shipments required enhanced security measures to prevent theft during transport. Miguel learned to identify trailers that had been equipped with false floors, concealed panels, and modified refrigeration systems that created hidden storage spaces invisible to casual inspection but accessible to workers with appropriate knowledge and tools. The modifications were professionally designed and installed, requiring detailed technical knowledge to detect or access without damaging the trailer's legitimate cargo or refrigeration capabilities. The criminal organization that had recruited Miguel and Roberto was part of a sophisticated money laundering network that served multiple cartel operations throughout Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and California. The network used America's interstate trucking system to transport cash, proceeds from drug sales to processing facilities, where the money could be converted into legitimate financial instruments or prepared for shipment to Mexico and other countries where cartel operations were based. Refrigerated trailers were ideal for this purpose because their complex mechanical systems provided numerous opportunities for concealment, while their temperature-controlled cargo created legitimate reasons for avoiding detailed inspections that might reveal hidden compartments. Law enforcement officers conducting routine traffic stops or customs inspections were naturally reluctant to delay temperature-sensitive cargo that could spoil if transport was interrupted, creating cover for criminal organizations moving money and drugs through legitimate commercial channels. The operation had been running successfully for over 4 years, moving an estimated $2 billion in criminal proceeds through various transportation networks while avoiding detection by federal agencies that had focused their attention on more traditional money laundering methods involving bank wire transfers and currency exchange businesses. Miguel's contributions had been valuable, but represented only a small portion of the network's overall capacity until criminal organizers decided to use Lone Star Logistics for their largest single money transfer operation. The $12.3 million shipment represented a consolidation of drug proceeds that had been accumulating at collection points throughout the southwestern United States over several months of cartel operations. Instead of moving the money in smaller amounts that required multiple transactions and created numerous opportunities for detection, the criminal organization decided to transport the entire sum in a single shipment that would reduce their exposure to law enforcement surveillance while maximizing operational efficiency. Miguel was chosen for this assignment because of his proven reliability over 8 months of successful operations, his detailed knowledge of Lone Star Logistics procedures and security systems, and his demonstrated ability to handle complex cargo concealment without attracting attention from supervisors, co-workers, or law enforcement personnel who might be conducting surveillance of suspicious activities. The plan required Miguel to load the money into multiple refrigerated trailers over several days, distributing the cash among different shipments to avoid concentrating the entire amount in a single trailer that might attract attention if subjected to detailed inspection. Roberto provided specific instructions for concealing the money within modified trailers while maintaining normal loading schedules and procedures that wouldn't create obvious deviations from routine operations. But what Miguel and Roberto didn't know was that their criminal network was already under surveillance by federal agents who had been investigating money laundering operations in the Laredo area for over 18 months. The Drug Enforcement Administration had identified suspicious patterns in cross-border commerce and had been developing intelligence about criminal organizations that exploited legitimate transportation companies for illegal purposes. The investigation had been initiated based on intelligence from Mexican law enforcement agencies about cartel money movements through Texas border communities, combined with anomalies in shipping data that suggested systematic exploitation of commercial transportation networks. DEA agents had been working with FBI financial crime specialists and Customs and Border Protection officers to identify specific companies, vehicles, and personnel involved in money laundering operations. Federal agents had identified Lone Star Logistics as a company of interest based on shipping patterns, employee backgrounds, and relationships with customers whose business activities appeared inconsistent with legitimate commerce. The investigation had gradually focused on Roberto Mendez as a potential criminal coordinator and had expanded to include surveillance of employees who might be involved in loading and transporting criminal proceeds. Miguel's involvement had been detected through surveillance of his interactions with Roberto and analysis of shipping records that revealed correlations between trailers he had loaded and subsequent law enforcement intelligence about money laundering activities. Federal agents had been documenting Miguel's criminal activities for several weeks before the $12.3 million operation, gathering evidence that could support comprehensive prosecutions of the entire criminal network. But the surveillance also revealed that Miguel was planning something different for the major money transfer operation. Instead of following his usual pattern of loading money, according to Roberto's instructions, and allowing the trailers to proceed to their designated destinations, federal agents discovered evidence that Miguel was planning to intercept the money for his own purposes, rather than completing his assigned role in the criminal transportation network. Bank records showed that Miguel had been making financial preparations for permanent departure from Laredo, including liquidation of his few assets, termination of his apartment lease, and arrangements for his family's financial support that didn't require his continued presence in the United States. The preparations suggested that Miguel was planning to disappear after stealing the cartel money rather than continuing his role as a criminal transportation asset. The theft occurred exactly as federal agents had anticipated, with Miguel successfully loading $12.3 million in cash into refrigerated trailers during his regular work shifts, while maintaining normal procedures that didn't attract attention from supervisors or coworkers. But instead of allowing the trailers to proceed to their designated destinations, Miguel used his knowledge of Lone Star Logistics operations to reroute the vehicles to locations where he could access the hidden money without interference from criminal operatives or law enforcement surveillance. Miguel's escape plan had been developing for weeks before the theft, demonstrating careful preparation and sophisticated understanding of both law enforcement tracking methods and criminal organization capabilities. He had established false identity documents through criminal contacts developed during his months of illegal work, arranged transportation that would allow him to cross into Mexico without creating official records, and prepared financial resources that would support extended hiding while he determined his long-term options. The discovery of Miguel's theft triggered massive response from both federal law enforcement agencies and the criminal organization that owned the missing money. The FBI launched a comprehensive manhunt that included surveillance of Miguel's known associates, examination of his financial records and personal belongings, coordination with Mexican law enforcement agencies, and intensive analysis of every piece of evidence that might provide clues about his escape route and current whereabouts. Lone Star Logistics conducted extensive internal investigation of their security procedures and employee screening processes, discovering vulnerabilities that had allowed criminal organizations to exploit their operations for illegal purposes over extended periods. The company implemented enhanced security measures, improved monitoring systems, and new employee background checking procedures designed to prevent similar criminal exploitation of their transportation services. But the most violent and systematic response came from the cartel operatives who viewed Miguel's theft as a direct challenge to their authority that required immediate retaliation to maintain their reputation for punishing anyone who threatened their financial interests. The organization deployed enforcement teams to Laredo with instructions to locate Miguel, recover the stolen money, and eliminate anyone who might have assisted him or possessed information about his whereabouts. The cartel's investigation was brutal and comprehensive, involving torture and murder of individuals who might have had contact with Miguel during his preparation for the theft, or who possessed knowledge about Lone Star Logistics procedures that could have facilitated his criminal activities. Within the first week after the theft was discovered, 3 warehouse workers were found dead in separate incidents, apparently killed during interrogations about Miguel's activities and possible escape plans. Roberto Mendez was found shot execution style in his car 2 days after Miguel's disappearance, presumably eliminated because the cartel held him responsible for the security breach that had allowed the theft to occur. His death also served to eliminate a potential source of information for law enforcement agencies investigating the broader criminal network and its methods of operation. The violence escalated as cartel operatives expanded their investigation to include Miguel's social connections within Laredo's Mexican-American community, conducting systematic interrogations designed to gather intelligence while sending messages about the consequences of cooperating with anyone who threatened cartel operations. The brutality demonstrated the organization's capabilities and their determination to recover the stolen money, regardless of collateral damage to innocent people. Federal agents placed several individuals under protective custody after receiving intelligence about specific cartel threats, but the manhunt continued as criminal operatives pursued leads across Texas, Mexico, and other states where Miguel might have fled with the stolen money. The investigation became a deadly race between law enforcement agencies seeking to arrest Miguel and criminal organizations seeking to eliminate him while recovering their assets. The FBI's investigation revealed that Miguel had successfully crossed into Mexico within hours of the theft, using false documentation and transportation networks that had been arranged through criminal contacts developed during his months of illegal work. Mexican law enforcement agencies were notified of his fugitive status and provided with detailed information about his background and possible destinations. But the vast territory of northern Mexico and limited resources for tracking individual fugitives made comprehensive searches impractical. What the FBI didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Miguel Santos had never intended to disappear forever. Hidden in a nondescript apartment complex in East Los Angeles, not the mountains of Mexico as everyone believed, Miguel was methodically planning the most audacious gambit of his criminal career. He was going to become a federal informant and bring down the entire cartel network that had transformed him from an honest worker into America's most wanted fugitive. The deception had begun months before the $12.3 million theft, when Miguel first realized that his involvement with Roberto Mendez and the cartel money laundering operation would inevitably end in either his arrest or his death. Unlike the desperate man driven by financial necessity that he appeared to be, Miguel had been systematically documenting every aspect of the criminal network from his very first assignment, secretly photographing money transfers, recording conversations, and maintaining detailed logs that would eventually become the most comprehensive intelligence package ever assembled about cartel operations within the United States. His elderly mother in Guadalajara, whose medical expenses had supposedly motivated his criminal involvement, was not the helpless invalid Miguel had described to his co-workers and associates. Maria Santos was a retired accountant who had spent 30 years working for various businesses in Guadalajara, including several companies that Mexican federal investigators suspected had been fronts for money laundering operations. Maria possessed encyclopedic knowledge of financial techniques used by criminal organizations to convert drug proceeds into legitimate assets, and she had been secretly advising Miguel throughout his involvement with the cartel network, helping him identify vulnerabilities while developing strategies for ultimately betraying the organization and escaping prosecution through cooperation with American law enforcement. The medical expenses that Miguel claimed were draining his finances were actually consulting payments to his mother for advice about cartel financial operations, money movement techniques, and the complex network of legitimate businesses that criminal organizations use to disguise their activities. Maria had been using her connections within Guadalajara's business community to gather intelligence about cartel operations, while Miguel established himself as a trusted transportation asset, creating a two-person intelligence operation that had been functioning undetected for over 18 months. Miguel's transformation from reliable warehouse worker to sophisticated criminal operative had been carefully orchestrated, with each step designed to increase his access to sensitive information while building credibility with cartel operatives, who gradually began trusting him with increasingly important responsibilities. His exemplary work record and reputation for reliability had been genuine, but they also served as perfect cover for criminal activities that required someone above suspicion to execute successfully. The $12.3 million theft had been the culmination of this long-term strategy, designed to provide Miguel with sufficient leverage to negotiate favorable terms with federal authorities while demonstrating his value as a cooperating witness through his willingness to steal from the world's most dangerous criminal organizations. The money itself was less important than the intelligence Miguel had been gathering, but the dramatic theft would guarantee federal attention and create urgency for negotiations that might otherwise have been delayed or dismissed. But Miguel's carefully crafted plan had intersected with federal operations that were far more complex and dangerous than he had anticipated. Roberto Mendez, his criminal coordinator, and the man Miguel believed had been executed by cartel operatives as punishment for the security breach that enabled the theft, was actually alive and in federal custody, having been secretly cooperating with the Drug Enforcement Administration for over 8 months before Miguel's involvement with the money laundering network began. Roberto's cooperation had provided federal agents with detailed advance intelligence about cartel operations, including specific information about the $12.3 million transfer that Miguel had stolen. DEA agent Marcus Rodriguez had been running Roberto as an informant in a complex operation designed to penetrate cartel financial networks by allowing criminal activities to continue while gathering intelligence about higher-level operatives who could be targeted for arrest and prosecution once sufficient evidence had been collected. Miguel's unexpected theft had disrupted this carefully planned federal operation, eliminating crucial evidence and allowing high-value cartel targets to escape while implementing enhanced security measures that would make future intelligence gathering significantly more difficult. The 3 warehouse workers who had been found dead after Miguel's disappearance had been murdered not by cartel enforcement teams seeking information about the theft, but by criminal associates working as federal informants who were eliminating potential witnesses that might have exposed Roberto's cooperation and endangered ongoing investigations. The staged execution of Roberto Mendez had been orchestrated by federal agents to protect their valuable informant while maintaining the illusion that cartel operatives were conducting violent investigations into Miguel's theft. Roberto was now living under federal protection in a secure facility outside Phoenix, continuing to provide information about cartel operations while his apparent death served to convince criminal associates that the organization was maintaining discipline and pursuing justice for the stolen money. Special Agent Sarah Chen of the FBI's Financial Crimes Division had been coordinating the search for Miguel while simultaneously managing the complex interaction between multiple federal investigations that had been compromised by his theft. Chen had discovered that the cartel organization Miguel had stolen from was actually under investigation by 3 separate federal agencies: FBI, DEA, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, each running independent operations that were largely unaware of the other's activities until Miguel's crime created conflicts that threatened to expose all of them. The revelation that federal agencies had been working at cross purposes while pursuing the same criminal targets had triggered a comprehensive reassessment of interagency coordination, protocols, and intelligence sharing procedures. Chen found herself in the unprecedented position of trying to minimize damage to ongoing operations while preventing further interference between competing federal investigations that were now working against each other, rather than toward common objectives. Miguel's first contact with the FBI came 3 weeks after his disappearance, through an encrypted communication channel that he had learned about during his months working within the cartel network. The message was sophisticated and carefully crafted. "I have documentation of $2 billion in cartel money laundering operations. I know about federal informants, compromised investigations, and planned operations worth hundreds of millions. I want to negotiate cooperation, but only with someone who has authority to make binding agreements about immunity and protection." The message had been routed through multiple proxy servers and encrypted with military-grade security protocols, demonstrating technical sophistication that federal analysts found inconsistent with Miguel's background as a warehouse worker. Further investigation revealed that Miguel had been receiving technical assistance from sources within the hacker community who specialized in providing security services to individuals seeking to avoid government surveillance, suggesting that his escape plan had been more comprehensive and professionally supported than initially believed. Agent Chen's analysis of the communication patterns and technical signatures eventually revealed that Miguel's messages were not originating from Mexico, as everyone had assumed, but from somewhere within the greater Los Angeles metropolitan area. The discovery that Miguel had never left the United States represented a fundamental shift in investigative strategy, eliminating the diplomatic complications associated with international fugitive cases while creating new opportunities for surveillance and eventual capture. Los Angeles provided Miguel with ideal conditions for remaining hidden while continuing his intelligence-gathering activities. The city's vast immigrant population offered cover for someone avoiding detection, while its complex urban environment provided numerous secure locations for communication and movement. Most importantly, Los Angeles was home to federal offices where high-level negotiations about cooperation and witness protection could be conducted with appropriate security and confidentiality measures that would protect both Miguel and any federal agents involved in the process. Miguel had been using portions of the stolen $12.3 million to fund a sophisticated intelligence operation designed to gather information that would make him invaluable as a cooperating witness. He had hired private investigators to conduct surveillance of cartel operatives, purchased information from criminal sources throughout Southern California, and documented ongoing illegal activities while building a comprehensive case file that could support major federal prosecutions against dozens of high-level criminals. The evidence Miguel was assembling included detailed financial records of cartel investments in legitimate businesses throughout California, Arizona, and Texas, providing federal investigators with unprecedented insight into how criminal organizations converted drug proceeds into legal assets while avoiding detection by traditional banking oversight mechanisms. His documentation included photographs and videos of criminal operatives conducting illegal activities, recorded conversations with cartel members discussing future operations, and detailed maps of money laundering routes that connected criminal operations across multiple states and international borders. But Miguel's most valuable intelligence concerned cartel preparations for a massive operation that would represent the largest money laundering conspiracy in American history. Through his network of criminal contacts and purchased intelligence, Miguel had learned about detailed plans for moving over $500 million in drug proceeds through American financial institutions during a coordinated operation scheduled to coincide with major holidays, when banking oversight would be reduced and transaction volumes would be high enough to conceal criminal transfers among legitimate commercial activities. The planned operation would involve dozens of corrupt employees at major banks, armored car services, currency exchange businesses, and wire transfer companies across California, Arizona, Nevada, Texas, and New Mexico. Criminal operatives had been recruiting bank employees, security personnel, and financial services workers for over 2 years, building a network of corrupted insiders who would facilitate the massive money movement while ensuring that suspicious activity reports and other regulatory notifications would be suppressed or delayed until the operation was completed. Miguel's intelligence indicated that the cartel had invested millions of dollars in corrupting American financial infrastructure, bribing employees at every level, from bank tellers to regional managers, while establishing legitimate business fronts that would provide cover for the unprecedented volume of cash transactions required to move $500 million through banking systems designed to detect and report suspicious activities. The operation represented a fundamental escalation in cartel capabilities, demonstrating their ability to compromise American financial institutions on a scale that threatened the integrity of the entire banking system. Federal investigators analyzing Miguel's intelligence discovered that the planned money laundering operation was connected to cartel drug trafficking activities that generated far more revenue than law enforcement agencies had previously estimated. The $500 million represented only a fraction of accumulated criminal proceeds that cartels had been unable to launder through traditional methods, suggesting that American drug consumption was funding criminal organizations with resources that rivaled those of legitimate multinational corporations. The implications of Miguel's intelligence extended far beyond traditional drug enforcement priorities, revealing vulnerabilities in American financial systems that could be exploited by terrorist organizations, foreign intelligence agencies, and other criminal networks with sufficient resources and sophistication to corrupt banking infrastructure. The cartel's success in recruiting corrupt employees throughout the financial sector demonstrated techniques that could be adapted for other illegal purposes, creating national security implications that required coordination between law enforcement agencies and financial regulatory authorities. Agent Chen's negotiations with Miguel became increasingly complex as federal agencies recognized the strategic importance of his intelligence while struggling with the legal and operational challenges associated with granting immunity to someone who had committed serious federal crimes. Miguel's theft of $12.3 million remained a significant criminal act that had disrupted legitimate law enforcement operations, but his cooperation could potentially prevent hundreds of millions in additional criminal proceeds from being laundered while exposing corrupt employees who posed ongoing threats to financial system integrity. The negotiation process revealed that Miguel's demands were more sophisticated than typical criminal cooperation agreements. Beyond standard requests for immunity and witness protection, Miguel was seeking federal assistance for his mother's extraction from Mexico, where her safety was increasingly threatened as cartel investigators expanded their search for anyone who might have assisted Miguel's theft and escape. He was also demanding that federal agencies coordinate their investigations to prevent further interference between competing operations, demonstrating his understanding of the bureaucratic complications that had been hampering law enforcement effectiveness. Miguel's proposal included detailed recommendations for restructuring federal investigations to maximize intelligence gathering while minimizing conflicts between agencies that were pursuing overlapping targets through incompatible methods. His suggestions reflected sophisticated understanding of both criminal operations and law enforcement procedures, indicating that his intelligence value extended beyond simple information sharing to include strategic analysis of how federal agencies could improve their effectiveness against organized crime networks. As federal agencies considered Miguel's cooperation proposal, investigators continued analyzing the broader implications of his case for American law enforcement strategies against international organized crime. Miguel's transformation from legitimate worker to sophisticated criminal operative demonstrated vulnerabilities in American society that criminal organizations were systematically exploiting, recruiting individuals with access to critical infrastructure while providing them with technical training and financial incentives that overwhelmed their moral and legal obligations to remain law-abiding citizens.